Mr. McCloy, the commission came into being late in 1963, went through to September 64 when you were dissolved. Could you have used more time? There is the charge that your conclusions were rushed, that there was some stringent time scale imposed.
The conclusions weren't rushed at all. If there's any charge that can be made, and maybe this is an unjust charge because I wasn't in charge of it, I'm inclined to think that we perhaps rushed to print a little too soon. But the conclusions we arrived at in our own good time. I think that there's one thing that I would do over again. I would insist on those photographs and the X-rays having been produced before us. And in one respect, and only one respect there, I think that we were perhaps a little oversensitive to what we understood was the sensitivities of the Kennedy family against the production of colored photographs of the body and so forth. But those exist, they're there. We had the best evidence in regard to that, the pathology in respect to the president's wounds. It was our own choice that we didn't subpoena these photographs which were then in the hands of the Kennedy family. I say, I wish, I don't think we subpoenaed them. We could have gotten. Mr. Warren was talking to the Kennedy family about that at that time. I thought that he was really going to see them, but it turned out that he hadn't.
It's not surprising that there should be some skeptics, quite obviously, to any such report. But how do you account for the fact that the disbelievers outnumber the believers by such a wide margin?
I think that if you want me to speculate on it, first place is the credulity of people generally. This is pretty spicy, pretty scandalous. Bear in mind that there have been an enormous amount of books written now, a large number of books written, pamphlets written, with the most shocking and distorted statements in regard to the evidence, with all of the blurbs and all of the propaganda. You know the business that goes with selling books. Many more thousands of those have been distributed and read than the rather limited distribution of the report with rather prosaic accounts. So that I suppose this tends to build the thing up. There are other things that I suppose you can talk about. Strange attitudes that people associate their politics with their belief or their disbelief in the report. I've gone to a number of campuses, for example. I'm astounded to find that they, professors as well as students, in many of the cases, I don't say the majority, think that it's illiberal to come to the conclusion that a communist-inclined defector could have been the assassin of the president. It's liberal to feel that it was the result of a right-wing conspiracy in the hostile atmosphere of Texas. And nothing that you can say or do seems to be able to dispel their viewpoint. Maybe there's a general distrust of government and government agencies. I don't know. You can speculate, Mr. Cronkite, as much as I can about it. What I do resist and what irritates me is any suggestion that the commission were motivated other than by, and I'll leave myself out, there were competent people in that commission, people who were experienced in investigation, like the senators and the congressmen, been through many types of investigation. Dulles, who was all sorts of people who FBI reports, appraising them, weighing them, taking many of them for something less than their face value. They went at this thing and they came to this conclusion, and there was nothing fraudulent about it. There was nothing sinister about it, either conscious or subconscious, in my judgment. And I think that, as I say, that common sense would tell you that this must be the case. We may have erred somewhere along the line, but so far I haven't seen any credible evidence which dispels the soundness of the fundamental conclusions that we came to.
In a way, we have come to the end of this report on the Warren Report. For some 3.5 hours now, we've presented what seemed to us the most significant new evidence concerning the assassination itself and the President's commission to investigate the assassination. Yet, over these months, as we prepared this report, we began to realize that there is one more question to be answered. That question does not really involve the assassination or the Warren Commission, except indirectly. It involves the people of the United States. We began to wonder how it is possible that so many more Americans disbelieve the Warren Report than have ever read it. Why, for instance, when fewer than 2 million copies of the report have been sold, a Gallup poll indicates that 6 Americans out of every 10 think they know enough about it to mistrust it? Or why, by a considerable margin, more people have bought copies of books attacking the report than have bought the report itself? Such indications began to suggest that, completely apart from the merits of the Warren Report itself, there may be something abroad in the land that wants not to believe the report's conclusion that President Kennedy was the victim of a lone madman and not of a... Our final question, then, could America believe the Warren Report? Dr. Seymour Lipset of Harvard is a distinguished sociologist whose special field of interest is American behavior. And Dan Rather asked him about this national reaction of disbelief to the Warren Report.
Sort of thing, you know, we're terribly bothered by murders, you know, when you get the kind of Jack the Ripper thing, or this fellow in Texas who's shot down. If someone's killed because for his money, if someone's kidnapped for his money, if this is okay. I mean, not that we don't want it, but at least you can understand what happened. And therefore, an assassination, which is a consequence of a plot, is like a murder in the context of a crime for more money by a gang. But if somebody is just shot down in the street by some fellow who just picked up a gun and shot him, well, if it happened to him, it can happen to you. If the president is assassinated not because of a rational plot, but because of just a nut who has a gun, then not only any president can be assassinated this way, which he can be, but anybody else can. It becomes a much less controlled world.
A man who looks into the American spirit from another viewpoint, but with equally keen interest, is historian Henry Steele Commager, whose book, Search for a Usable Past, is considered a major insight into what we are and how we got that way.
But I do think that there has come up in recent years, particularly since the coming to the Cold War, something that might be called a conspiracy psychology, a feeling that great events can't be explained by ordinary processes, that if anything goes wrong, whether it's a great thing like the so-called loss of China, or a particular thing, like a discovery of espionage somewhere, or the terrible fact of the assassination, is not to be explained as other historical events, but by some special standard of explanation to be applied to the United States. And the point is that the ordinary rules for the rest of the world don't hold for us. And so with a great number of the things that are ordinarily explained by the normal processes of history are not to be explained by this, because they don't apply to the United States. We are expected always to be victorious and always to triumph, and so forth and so forth. To this came added to this came the McCarthy era, with the miasma of suspicion, with the ceaseless insistence on conspiracy, on dirty work at the crossroads everywhere. And I think we have been persuaded very largely since the beginnings of the Cold War to be more receptive to conspiracy theories. I don't think we've become paranoid, but we were on the road to a paranoid explanation of things.
Do you think that a second investigation, an independent investigation into the assassination of the president, is any more likely to be believed than the Warren Commission?
I see no reason to suppose that anyone who doesn't believe the first will believe a second or a third or a fourth. The conspiracy theory, the conspiracy mentality will not accept ordinary evidence any more than the conspiracy mentality accepts the ordinary explanation of the assassination of Lincoln and the death of Booth. It has to, there's some psychological requirement that forces him to reject the ordinary and find refuge in the extraordinary. And if another investigation were to be held and came to the same conclusion as I'm inclined to think it would, who knows, I think it would be found just as unsatisfactory, and the critics would say, well, of course, this too is part of the establishment appointed this, they want this kind of an explanation, and we don't believe any of it because we know there's dirty work at the crossroads somewhere. They're covering things up. So I see no value really in another investigation.